Welcome to Project Design for Effective Trust Fundraising. My name is Deanna Wolf, and I'm the Senior Consultant for Trust Fundraising here at Money Tree Fundraising. And I've been doing trust fundraising now for almost 22 years, both in the United States and now here in the UK. Over the next hour or so, I'm going to take you through what effective project design looks like so that you, as a trust fundraiser, can work from a place of knowledge alongside your service delivery colleagues to make their everyday work the projects which grant makers want to fund. Competition for fundraising is getting tighter, and funders are looking beyond a well-written proposal or application. They are looking for strong and realistic project design. No matter how good your application is, no matter how tightly you've matched your work to their guidelines and proven the need for your service, the chance of being unsuccessful in this really competitive market remains really, really high. But it's no longer enough to just be a good cause or have needy beneficiaries. The cost of living crisis and the impacts of the COVID pandemic are impacting everyone and continue to. It's no longer enough to just deliver a service or a project because it's always been delivered. At the minimum, projects need to be purposeful. And to a certain extent, I know that I'm preaching to the converted. What I'm hopeful is that this presentation will help you if you need to go and speak with your senior managers or your service delivery team so they understand as well. Projects need to be clear in their approach and their activities, realistic in their design, delivery, and budget, and they need to meet an evidence need. They don't always need to be innovative, and they don't necessarily require a lot of bells and whistles. So, why us as trust fundraisers? Generally, we won't actually deliver the project. And my experience, we often speak a different language, use different jargon and terminology to the project or service delivery teams in our organizations. And in fact, they may also have had little or no hand in the design to what they do. They may be only one or a few of many people who are involved, and they don't see or have access to the bigger picture. They may also not be involved in monitoring and evaluating or record keeping of the activities that they are helping to deliver. Regardless of all this, it's our job to describe the project or service in terms funders want to use and in a way which is compelling. And we need to do it in a way that helps our proposal or bid stand out in a sea of just as worthy organizations and services. We need to use language and the project's design to align with the funder's organizational personality, agenda, and language so they can compare like for like with other requests and clearly understand and be able to monitor what progress and success will look like, what differences will be made. If our colleagues aren't able to or willing to do it, it's up to us to help them and get their agreement before we submit even one application. We can design, as trust fundraisers, we do this a lot. We design amazing programs and projects and we can describe them really well. But we have to make sure for success for us that the service delivery people we're working with are delivering the same project that we've described to our funders. And it's imperative that those lines of communication stay open. As trust fundraisers, you're going to be working with diverse organizations, beneficiaries and causes. And I think in some cases, based on some of the questions that we had, possibly the beneficiaries and causes are in different countries. What I'm going to be talking about today is going to be able to go over all of that, because giving you one set of instructions on how to design projects is just not feasible or realistic. So I'm going to try and give you a framework that is flexible and agile so that you can adapt it to your situation and to your country as you need to. But instead, I'm going to go through the elements of good project design you're going to need to consider when you're preparing your cases for support, proposals, and applications for funding. And in fact, a lot of these elements are going to be very similar to the integral components or elements of a well thought out or thorough proposal or application, because what they're asking for is the project. Good planning, whether for trust applications, cases for support, or project design, is going to help you mitigate any problems which may happen. If you have the structure, timetable, and stress under control, you'll be able to manage the crises, which will happen. You and the project or service delivery team will have the headspace for being creative and thinking of options to get a project or service back on track. Without good planning, you may have a lot of unnecessary stress or things falling to pieces. So why do we need good project design? One is that competition remains exceptionally high. A good cause and an excellent proposal or application is the bare minimum, but they rely on the project or service in question being appropriate for the beneficiaries and the best possible method given all the related factors. It's no longer enough to just deliver a service because the organization always has. It needs justification as advantageous to the beneficiaries. So it's not about the organization, it's about the beneficiaries. Ensuring that the beneficiaries' needs are being addressed is paramount to meeting your mission. The project needs to serve that purpose. And then clear objectives and goals, that's going to keep you on track no matter what. And it'll help you determine if the project has been successful. If you have multiple staffing layers between fundraising and the beneficiary, these objectives also give clarity for the service delivery team in what they need to do to achieve success. Sometimes it's more than just showing up, although a lot of people say it's 90% is just showing up. Things can and do go pear-shaped. Robert Burns wasn't exaggerating when he said that the best laid plans of mice and men gang after lay. I do live in Scotland. So having a good project design allows you to adjust your project or service to meet the new conditions or circumstances. For example, a well thought out project I worked on with a service delivery colleague was at the first reporting stage when we realized that the intended audience and participants weren't being recruited from the initially planned entrance route. They were coming in and we were getting the beneficiaries we wanted, but they were coming in through another route, which required some minor but really significant changes to our project plan. Seeing the full picture and having an alternative process, we were able to go back to the funder to get approval for the changes without a lot of mess and stress. And that just made everything a lot easier for everyone. When you know exactly what you're going to do and why, having contingencies and unexpected situations, your budget will be really fit for purpose, and funders are going to see that. Chances are you won't get halfway through the budget period and need to stop the project or service because you don't have enough funding, unless you started before you had it all in place, and that's always dangerous. This helps to show you understand what is actually involved in delivering your project or service and that you will be a safe pair of hands for the funder to distribute their grant into. Monitoring, reporting, and evaluation should be part of everything your charity is doing, which makes it easy to do on top of the project's delivery. Making it easy to do on top of the project's delivery means it's going to get done, and getting done is really, really important. For those projects or services which are being delivered because they're long-standing activities, it can confirm they are still needed or the changes which will need to be made are relevant and beneficial. Now, we're all getting busier. That's not an understatement. Having a clearly designed project is going to make it easier to describe your project to funders and others. You can answer the questions and you should be able to do so quickly and efficiently, especially since we are now having to put in so many more applications to be able to guarantee success, if we can at all. It also means that when you're speaking to funders, you're consistent in your descriptions. You don't need to keep reinventing your project and what you're doing. A well-designed project will meet the needs of your beneficiary or your cause because that's what it was created to do. When the project is clear and well-designed, it serves the needs of both fundraising and the service delivery teams, which reduces unnecessary work, ensuring everyone is on the same page and understands their role in its delivery. And it's not too onerous or frustrating for everyone because we want to keep the friction and frustration between service teams and fundraising. That needs to come down. It can get quite stressful for everyone. The other thing is that people leave their role either to another within the organization or the organization itself all the time. Your project, your service, cause, and beneficiaries shouldn't feel the brunt of that. By having a well-designed project and plan in place, your organization can ensure the delivery continues as seamlessly as possible. And if you're delivering it elsewhere, having a clear plan means that there's less misunderstandings and any flexibility required to adjust to a new location or group is more easily accomplished. Basically, you're doing a little bit more work in the beginning to make sure you have as smooth a plan as possible and smooth as a path as possible to tread as you deliver your project or service. This is going to reduce stress, confusion, and panic, and it can help you have a better relationship with your funders, potential funders, service delivery colleagues, and beneficiaries. In today's sessions, I'm going to go over 11 aspects of project design, which are going to help us as trust fundraisers, with a top tips list at the end. So if you have a clear and detailed information about all of these elements, which also have responses for the question, what happens if it doesn't, ... you will undoubtedly be fundraising for a robust and effective project. So the first is beneficiaries, problems, and co-creation, objectives, outcomes, impacts, and outputs, step-by-step delivery plan, staffing management and oversight, monitoring, reporting, and evaluation, promotion, marketing, and comms, partners, sustainability, contingency plans, which are always really important to have, budget, policies and supporting documents, and top tips. So beneficiaries is all about context and the problems and the co-creation. Not just because funders want to know who or what, if you work with animals or other causes, you're assisting. Knowing about your beneficiaries and their issues helps to give you a starting point from which you can compare and contrast the impact of your project or service. Can you describe them? Do you have a demographic and statistical information about them? This really leads to the why are you doing what you're doing. It also helps to identify and evidence what the need is and why that is important. Why do they need your help to solve it? Why is it important for your organization? And I'm putting the emphasis on purpose to provide a solution or solutions. And why are those solutions the best options? Why is the one you've chosen and for which you're applying for funding the best one or the best one at the time? If your beneficiaries have been involved in the creation of the solution provided by this project or service with you, it lends more credence and value to that solution. They are taking an active role with you. It lends improving their own situation and have based it on their own understanding and knowledge of their situation and capabilities. The solution is not being done to them. So when solutions are done to people, that was an older style of work in the charity sector. It's not really acceptable anymore for funders. They want things that people have been involved in. It's being delivered with them. If they or their representatives haven't been involved, it should be identified along with realistic and reasonable justification why not. For example, if you're working with people who are severely autistic and non-communicative, you may not be speaking with them and you may not be getting their input. What you may be doing is getting their carers or their parents or their representatives input, and those people may have a way to communicate with the people that you're working with. Keep in mind, your beneficiaries have a central role in your storytelling. An ethical approach, which avoids stereotyped images and context, othering of your beneficiaries, and the savior versus the saved dynamic is essential as funders are starting to become much more aware and intolerant of an unethical approach. Do not underestimate the value of having clearly identified objectives, outcomes, or impacts, and outputs for projects or services. On their own, they can provide its justification and tell you what your organization and the project want to achieve. They're the basis for measuring, reporting, and evaluating the success of its delivery, and they give your organization the content for impact reports and evaluating the success of the delivery. They give you your organization the content for impact reports and indicate how well you're serving your beneficiaries. They can frame the value and approach of a fundraising proposition, and they validate funders investing in your organization and your beneficiaries to ensure your fundraisers can continue to deliver to their targets. Not having them can put everything I've mentioned in danger. They should be smart. And by that, I mean specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant and realistic, and time-bound. They should also be quite simplistic. They should also be about what the project or service is or will actually be delivering, not what you think a funder wants to hear. If you tell the funder what they want to hear and you're delivering something different when you go to do your reports, it's going to be very difficult. It's akin to serious level gymnastics, and it becomes problematic on all sides, not to mention exceptionally fundraising. It can result in the funder requesting their support to be returned if it's found out, never funding you again, or possibly letting other funders know your organization isn't reliable, because funders speak to each other. If you're working with a project or service which has existed for a long time, and either these have been lost in the mist of times, or maybe they were never identified in the first place, it's worth working with your colleagues to deliver the activities to define them, possibly just by describing what's already happening. It's worth noting that sometimes funders call these different things, so match the definitions rather than the name and you should be fine. An objective is your overarching goal of the organization or project or service. For example, vulnerable ex-service personnel have improved quality of life as a civilian. An outcome or an impact is the benefit that a project or intervention is designed to deliver for an individual or a situation. There can be more than one outcome per objective. And for example, and these are objectives, outcomes, and outputs that I had in a grant a very long time ago to the lottery, and it was successful. So vulnerable ex-service personnel have improved benefits, mental and physical health, and was one of them. And vulnerable ex-service personnel are prepared for socialization to civilian life. And then finally, outputs are the tangible and intangible products which result from project activities. There can also be more than one output for each outcome. I'm just going to give you one in this case, and the example is 7 out of 10 participants have a good understanding of the benefits and assistance available to them and who to contact for further assistance. The value of a step-by-step plan is that if delivered properly, everyone knows what has just happened, what is happening, and what will happen. It's not just what will happen at the beginning, in the middle, and the end. It also ensures that components are not easily left out, or if they are, they can be identified really quickly and usually rectified, and that everyone is involved is aware of these components. It identifies what needs funding and at what level, as well as helping to point out missing steps, features, or staffing requirements. As a colleague who's also been a grant giver has recently mentioned to me, she often looks at the budget before the rest of the proposal or application to see if it's realistic and comprehensive. A step-by-step delivery plan allows a realistic delivery time to be established, which in turn contributes to fundraising timeline and plan and helps with evaluation. It keeps everyone on track and helps to manage expectations. And importantly, it helps to reduce stress and chaos for your participants or your beneficiaries, your project staff, and your fundraisers. To ensure it's achievable, work backwards from the end of the project. And don't forget to include any prep or recruitment activities. So that means that your budget may cover a period of time, say 3, 4, 5, 6 months or more, before you actually open the doors or start delivering the project itself, because you're getting all the preparation ready. If changes are required, they can be more easily fitted into the schedule with as little disruption as possible, and allows for greater flexibility for any of the resulting adjustments which need to be made. For the project and its participants, staff, fundraising, and funders, this really helps. It also helps to foster funder confidence in your organization to be able to deliver the project on time, to budget, and in line with your objectives. Your organization becomes a better risk for their investment in you. And that is what their grants and awards are. It's an investment in your solution and in you. Now, a project or service delivery plan needs to outline the staffing, management, and oversight required. Without it, things become chaotic, service delivery can fail, and the losers are ultimately the beneficiaries, with staff, fundraisers, and organizational reputations becoming collateral damage. Having a plan means the lines of responsibility are clear and the tasks can be reviewed to ensure that they are assigned appropriately. It also means the balance of staffing at the delivery and supervisory levels can be reviewed for effectiveness. When things go pear-shaped, knowing who to turn to for adjustments or to fix things can mean the difference between a successful and failed project. It also means the beneficiaries don't lose out on their services. Not everything's going to go to plan. In fact, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that at least one thing will go counter to your original plan, and a good proportion of the time that can be due to staffing issues. A clear plan will also help you to identify if there's a disciplinary, sickness, personality conflict, or insufficiency issue, which means you're going to be one step closer to a solution and getting things back on track. In my roughly 40 years of employment, I've always disliked when I'm left unclear about my tasks and the level of my responsibility and/or authority. It leaves me feeling uncertain and unhappy in my job. This applies as well when I'm working with a team where none of us are clear, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. Tasks don't get done, activities are not led properly, and participants also lose out. This lack of clarity can have a significant negative impact on the successes of a project or of a service. Clarity in staffing, roles, and oversight are also fundamental for beneficiaries to know who they're working with and who they should approach if they feel something isn't right. Finally, if staffing, management, and oversight aren't clear, safeguarding can become an issue, and this is really obvious to funders. Now, monitoring and evaluation are vital and shouldn't be done solely for the purposes of fundraising. They provide the evidence to show your organization, project, or service is successful in achieving its objectives as a service and for the beneficiaries. Including these activities in the planning stages of a project or service, or as part of an overall description of an ongoing project or service, is time well spent. It reduces scrambling at the last minute to get evidence for funders or senior managers' reports. It can also ensure its collection is done efficiently and with minimal impact on all involved at the time. The easier it is for monitoring and evaluation to happen, the greater the chances that people are going to do it. Ideally, it should be included as part of the initial design and established at the same time as the objectives. But we know all know ideal and ideally don't always happen. And so it can help if service staff and management know why it's necessary. A lot of times telling someone to do something and explaining why you need them to do something put people on different feet, and they put them in a different mood for willingness to accept and deliver. They don't always know why it's necessary and what's on the line if the information is not collected. For instance, returning the funding, not getting repeat funding, and at the extreme, closing down the project or service for all who attend and possibly putting staff out of work, especially when those staff are only paid from a grant. The connection between fundraising and service delivery is not obvious to everyone. And it's not obvious to non-fundraisers, especially if your organization also gets statutory funding or commissioned funding. All too often, I've heard from service delivery staff, well, they'll find the money, they always do. But I have to say that more often than not, and more often than we like, we don't always do. And in the current fundraising landscape, commissioned and statutory funding is no longer as guaranteed or as consistent as we wanted it to be. So whilst monitoring and evaluation should always be linked to the objectives, outcomes, and outputs, because that makes it a lot easier for everyone, it can be as simple as putting a piece of paper on a table and every time someone walks past, a tick mark is made to measure attendance. Once upon a time, I was a reference librarian in a public library. And when we were doing circulation and reference stat weeks, we literally taped a piece of paper to the table. Every time someone asked us a question, we did a tick box. It helped us get our funding from the government when we were doing it, and it meant a massive difference to us. It was also really easy. It can be quantitative and/or qualitative, and it includes simple attendance figures, case studies, participant surveys, and demographic information, or can go into greater detail using much more complex monitoring and progression tools such as outcome stars and so forth, or the Warwick well-being systems. Plans should be agreed in advance, though, and they should be agreed in advance with staff before they're included in the application or awards, or that the awards are accepted. If you're not able to secure strictly quantitative data, quantify the qualitative data. For example, the percentage of feedback that you received was positive or negative. And the best monitoring plan is useless if it's not applied. So remember, monitoring done along the way means you won't be in a panic at the last minute or have to invent figures to complete a report. It also means you'll have a more accurate measure of activity and can quickly catch any problems before they become difficult to fix. On that note, do not fabricate or embellish your results. It can be acceptable to shine a spotlight on more than one aspect than another, yet if you're not transparent in your reporting, your organization is going to be in quite a lot of trouble and may have to return funding. It can cause long-term damage to your organization's reputation and possibly your own if your name is attached to it with the funder in question, and as well as with others. In extreme cases, it may result in legal action being taken against your organization. Monitoring and evaluating projects can also provide the evidence needed when planning future activities to repeat, expand, replicate, or cancel a project or service. So make it count. Now, the design of a project or service needs to include elements which are not directly part of its delivery to your beneficiaries. And these activities include things such as promotion, marketing, comms. If your project or service is about a cause, these may have much more of a role, as raising awareness may be a significant aspect of the project. The service delivery and marketing or comms functions in an organization are really important. However, for a project designed to be robust, there can only be one focus and one department in the driving seat. Having a clearly written project or service design plan ensures fundraising, marketing/comms, and service delivery teams remain on the same page, focusing on the same overarching objectives and maintaining consistency in the language used to describe it. That should allow for some language adjustments for their different audiences. But fundraising, especially trust fundraising, often finds itself in that driver's seat, as we often have the experience through answering funders' questions to put together such a design plan. It doesn't mean that we should be in this position. And if we are in this position, then what we need to do is make sure that we've got agreement from everyone across the board. Maintaining a clear purpose will aid delivery and reduce confusion or misdirection. Having a confirmed work or action plan, which includes all three functions and is tied to the project or service timeline, can improve your success and help achieve the desired outcomes for the beneficiaries. What having all of these things together in one plan and one project design is going to do is tell the funders that your organization is joined up. The right hand and the left hand both know what's going on, and your right foot and left foot also do. And everyone's working together for the same purpose. This all contributes to their view of you as a good risk. Now, partners. Partners can often make or break a project or service, and funders often look more welcoming to partnerships, assuming that they are formal, so funding recipients are clearly identified. Our organizations are rarely perfect with the exact skill mix we need. Having partners for your project or services can be a great way to bring in additional skills and resources, and having a clear project design along with a comprehensive partnership agreement means everyone is on the same page, knows their role, responsibilities, and how they fit into that big picture. Involving partners with the plan or project design is being pulled together as it's being pulled together means that formal agreements and paperwork can be put in place early, not at the last minute when the deadline's looming, the computer's having a meltdown, and the partner's staff have all gone home for the evening. It also means staff from both or more partners can get to know each other, which will ease tensions, improve interpersonal lines of communication, and make for a better working environment once the project or service is underway. You do need to recognize that while risk is shared somewhat, it can also be increased. And there can be interpersonal and control issues, especially if either partner goes off-piste. This is why partnership agreements are really necessary. Think of them like a charity prenup. Sustainability. Sustainability should definitely be considered in a project's design. Many charities have an inward focus when it comes to sustainability, keeping the organization in a good financial position, maintaining and improving staffing levels, salaries and benefits, and in some cases, though I would hope that this is in all cases, keeping the project or service active. And that should probably be the main reason for sustainability. Many funders, however, are not funding the organization. They're not. I realize that you're getting the money, but you're not the end goal of the funder. They're funding the solution, the work, the impact, the beneficiaries. They can just as easily fund another organization which is providing the same impact for the beneficiaries or cause and its staffing, which is favored by the funder. And that's part of what the competition is right now. So you may be up as a charity, you may be up as against one other charity, and you're both doing amazing work and you don't get the money because potentially the other organization has explained the impact and how it's going to be longer term better to the funder. They can just as easily fund that other organization for the same impact. And in some situations, sustainability of the organization and its staffing, or rather the staff roles, will ensure the continued delivery of the impact for the cause or the beneficiaries. That's great. And it's important if your organization is the only one delivering these impacts in your area. Otherwise, beneficiaries want access to a service, and they may not particularly care whether it's your organization delivering it or someone else. When addressing your project sustainability, you should be considering how to continue delivery once the current or potential funding has ceased. That is, if continuing is appropriate. Another way to look at sustainability is by focusing on impact. What will have changed longer term for the beneficiaries or cause? Is that change and the related behaviors sustainable? For example, will relationships developed in a community group reducing socialization result in friendships which last longer than the program or the group activities, or happen outside of the location where the group activities are occurring? Or are they dependent on the group's meetings themselves? Will the work a counseling service does with addicts result in those individuals remaining addiction-free, even if that work is no longer happening? Or will the addictive behaviors return once the work has ceased? Depending on the situation, please note that if continuing the project or service is required to ensure that the positive impact continues, that can be a solid reason for seeking additional funding. So one way to ensure a project's sustainability is to clearly link its objectives, outcomes, and outputs, rather than to the salary of a service delivery or management staff member. The world's an uncertain place with a lot right now, with a lot of organizations seeking funding to deal with crisis and emergency level issues. Funders want to know their money is going to make a difference immediately or as part of a longer term plan and longer term solution. Your approach to sustainability will impact this. Be clear in your description and your approach, and be prepared, if possible, to back it up with evidence. Finally, environmental sustainability is now being required by outside funders an awful lot more, and is often a mark of social responsibility and credibility. Your project plan should address this. For example, meetings requiring traveling by airplane, are they necessary if video teleconferencing would work just as well? You need to have those conversations. Contingency plans. This is always fun. Something will go wrong. Something will always go wrong. And sometimes lots of things go wrong. Having a plan A, B, or C, or in my case, I like having a plan sorted in advance as part of your overall project design, means that it can be enacted almost seamlessly, with as little stress as possible and minimal interruption for your beneficiaries. In fact, if you've got the plans in place and have thought of all the things that could potentially go wrong, no one actually may realize that it's gone wrong because you've immediately gone to the plan that fixes it. It also means you may be able to maintain your original objectives and outcomes, and may not have to update your funds, or rather may only have to update your funders with the situation, rather than asking them to approve major changes on how your funds are used. If your contingency plans are acknowledged in your budget, your chances of requiring major changes to it are significantly reduced. Now, what I mean by that is don't have just a contingency budget and a line for contingencies. Have an idea of, if this goes wrong, this is how much it's going to cost. Put that in. You can say that it's not necessary, but you want to maybe make sure that you are planning to have the funding available. Funders and your project delivery teams are going to feel a lot more secure with your planning if you've put thought towards it and realistic options are available. It really is the equivalent of carrying an umbrella if it rains. And on today, umbrellas are necessary, although the sun's coming out here and there. So the budget. It's extremely rare for a project or service to have no costs. Even if everything has been donated and there are only volunteers, there's still going to be an overhead costs related to staffing, administration, or your location, which is going to be incurred. Your project design needs to be reflected in your budget, and your budget needs to support your project design. Without the budget, funding is going to be difficult to secure, and without funding, chances are your project or service won't be happening. The budget can often show if a project or service has been realistically and comprehensively designed. If an element isn't in the budget, how's it going to be funded, and will it actually happen or be included? The budget can often be a way into discussion about the robustness of a project's design with colleagues and other teams. The budget provides a skeleton upon which the flesh of the project's design, namely the activities, is built. Without the budget, even if the funds are already in place, are being pulled from other budgets in the organization, the project remains an idea rather than a plan. It can also show if an organization is realistic in its planning and therefore a good risk. Budgets need to be thorough, realistic, and achievable. They need to reflect actual costs and have adjustments for inflation and contingencies. They don't, however, have to be complicated. Policies and supporting documents. It's not just about the plans for the project or service. Funders want to know your organization is taking their work generally very seriously. And after all, you may be working with diverse and possibly vulnerable people, and you're possibly getting quite a lot of money from funders to do so. They want to know that you are a good risk for them to get financially involved with you. Your governance resources need to support your project and service, and they need to adhere to your policies and organizational rules, as well as any legalities your organization is subject to. Having safeguarding and other policies and plans and procedures in place reduce problems in the first place, and they provide an action plan in the case a problem does occur. Get them in place, even if your charity is really small or your project or service is really small. If something does go wrong, or you need to know if you can accept a particular funding award or a particular potential beneficiary, having them on hand means you can deal with issues immediately rather than drag them out and become more problematic. Recently, we've noticed potential funders wanting not just safeguarding and reserves policies to be included and submitted with applications. They're also requesting EDI policies and the EDI action plans, environmental policies, and how a project or service is addressing environmental targets such as net zero. And in Scotland, it's fair and living wage policies. And these are for things like the National Community Lottery Fund, and then the organizations that are part funded by that, such as Arts Council England and Creative Scotland. So keep these in mind as you're working through your planning. Remember, you and your service delivery colleagues should be able, at minimum, to answer all of these questions about your project or service. And this is what funders want to know when it comes right down to it. The clearer and more comprehensive information you have about your project, the easier it's going to be to describe and justify the value of your project to them. And you never know who you're going to meet in an elevator and how they're going to be connected to a funding opportunity. So who are your beneficiaries and who are you? And by that, I mean your organization. Why does it need to be done? Why do they need support? What is the support needed? And why does it need to be your organization that does it? Where will the project or service take place? Where are you located? And where are the beneficiaries? What are you going to do? What are you going to accomplish? And what is the impact that's going to be for the beneficiary, society, or your organization? What will happen if the support doesn't happen or if funding is not available? And that one, I'm starting to see that on application forms, is what happens if you don't get the funding? When will the project or service take place? And when do you need the money for? A great and comprehensive plan is not so great if it starts before you're able to get the funding in. And that's what I meant by sometimes if you start, it's sometimes not a bad thing. Depends on whether you're looking for general funds across the entire year. Fundraisers are going to need this completed plan at least 6 months, if not 9 to 12 months before the project is due to start. And I know that as fundraisers, I'm teaching you to suck eggs, so to speak. How are you going to do the what? This is where the detailed step-by-step project or service plan comes into effect. How much time and money will it take, and are both of those reasonable? And then finally, how many people or creatures will be helped, and how many people or creatures will need to do the what? And are both of those reasonable? So to wrap up, as we're coming close to the end, here are my top tips for project design as a trust fundraiser. Write it down. Even as an observer, having something on paper will help you with applications and reporting. People, including you, forget, move on, get distracted, and get busy. You'll be scrambling for it at some point, and you don't want to make things harder for yourself. Get everyone on board with the plan by senior management requirement if necessary, including sometimes getting senior management to require their senior management colleagues to get on board. Even if it's only you doing so, identify what could go wrong and come up with some potential solutions, some contingency plans. I have a tendency to say I'm a Plan Z girl just because that's the way my brain works. But when it does go pear-shaped, having a ready-made solution can not only save the day, it can seem like it was the plan all the way along. And then you look great. As a fundraiser, look at the project plan from the funder's point of view. Pick holes in the project, in the budget, in the evidence. Why wouldn't you fund it? Fix those holes. Amend the project plan. Work with your service delivery teams and colleagues when you're doing this. Whether as an exercise you do it together or by going back to them to clarify specific points. Get beneficiary or their representatives' input and co-design along the way. Co-design, whether our organizations like it or not, is the way forward whenever and however possible. This requires advanced planning. With luck, that's going to mean more notice for us in advance as fundraisers of new propositions that we need to field. We've always done it this way is not a valid reason. And if you've always done it this way, and you will always end up getting the same results, except that externally the environment has changed completely. Be able to justify why a project or service needs funding and needs to be delivered, and delivered in the way that you're planning and by your organization. Clear objectives, outcomes, outputs, and robust monitoring and evaluations are not extras. If you don't have them, work them out. If your service delivery colleagues don't know how or won't do them, draft them yourself for their agreement. It's not your job to develop them. It is your job to detail them in applications and indicate how they were achieved in reports. And that may mean that you need to do the initial draft. Budgets need to be realistic, specific, and comprehensive. They also need to be common sense. Interrogate them for accuracy and common sense, like I said, and go back to the service delivery team if something doesn't seem right. Do include overheads whenever possible. We all have core costs to meet. However, don't over or double charge them. If your overheads are more than the project costs, don't do that. The way I tend to do overheads is 10% of the project's budget, not 10% of the overheads costs. If things don't go to plan, keep the funder in the loop. Get their approval on adjustments to keep their funding, and you can sometimes use these situations to build or improve a relationship. There are quite a lot of them that are looking for things that didn't go quite right, so they can support their fundees a little bit better, their awardees a little bit better, but also they can sometimes have solutions and have resources you don't, that will help save the day, so to speak. And then finally, good planning takes time, effort, and cooperation. It improves understanding of the goals and the need for the project. It's comprehensive and makes fundraising, grant, and project management easier. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. I invite you to reflect on what I've shared today and commit to an action in order to elevate your grant applications and secure more funding for your charity. Thank you very much for listening.